Welcome back, everyone, to Neighbors in the Network. I'm James Pinedo, your host, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Joanna Holbert, the Director of Outreach at Empower Mississippi. Joanna, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Before we get started and hearing more about your story, we have an introduction from our own Jane McEnany. Joanna Holbert is the epitome of a happy warrior. She serves as the Director of Outreach at Empower Mississippi, where she is dedicated to building connections and amplifying the voices of those directly impacted by public policy, but who might not otherwise be engaged in advocacy. Joanna's career began in journalism as a newspaper editor. Her experience in this field has equipped her with a keen eye for compelling storytelling. Her ability to craft impactful messages enables Empower to foster next-level community engagement. Her humility makes her quick to downplay how critical the work she does is, but I really think the authentic inroads she has made in her community, especially with public school teachers and administrators, is a model of all network partners who would be wise to emulate him. Joanna has a wealth of experience and valuable insight into navigating the complexities of how policy impacts everyday individuals. Her dedication to fostering relationship dialogue with her community is no doubt a contributing factor to what makes Empower Mississippi so successful. With that introduction, Joanna, shall we get started?
Absolutely. That is a wow. I am very humbled by that. I don't know.
I'm sure that every word is true, and I can't wait to find out how true it is. So tell me a little bit, Joanna, about your background. How did you grow up?
Well, I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I grew up in a little town called Long Beach, Mississippi. Actually, I was just talking with my family about this the other day, remembering Christmas time in Mississippi and especially in high school, driving up and down the beach, listening to Jimmy Buffett Christmas music. But yeah, I grew up going to Long Beach High School, great public school on the Gulf Coast. Just, a typical, I was the oldest of three girls, just, loving life on the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Hmm. Nice. That sounds quite idyllic. Would you say that you were interested in, well, politics and policy as a kid, or were you kind of an activist sort of family growing up?
Um, I wouldn't say that I was an activist or like followed policy and politics super closely. My grandfather was the head of the Mississippi Economic Council here in our state for years and years while I was growing up, which is our state chamber of commerce. And so I followed it a little bit just through interest in what he was doing. But to say that I was a hardcore, I would say probably not.
No. Were you close with your grandfather?
No, very close. He actually, um, upon his retirement, he actually started a small town weekly newspaper.
Hmm.
And that's where I got my start. I've lived on the Gulf Coast. This was in South Mississippi, about an hour north, and used to drive as a teenager in the summers the hour north to Hattiesburg to work in the summer in the family newspaper business.
Hmm.
And I got my start writing obituaries, which is not always an easy thing to do. I did not know that. I thought it was pretty simple. It's, pretty straightforward, but my grandfather informed me that no, that is not the case. And he explained to me how you write a proper obituary. But yeah, so that was really sort of how I got my start. Fell in love with telling stories.
Hmm. Yeah, I can tell. It's been a career-long pursuit for you, even now. And your grandfather, man, talk about breaking in the granddaughter with the toughest job. That sounds incredibly tough to me. What did he
It
say
was
about that?
interesting. I'm trying to remember the,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, what did he say about that when he said, "Okay, I'm just imagining. I'm okay, Joanna. This is your first job, and now you're going to have to write obituaries." That just seems like a tough conversation.
Well, it was very much like I had I heard them talking about starting the newspaper. He and my uncle, who was an attorney in the area, they wanted to start this newspaper and they wanted to talk about politics and what was going on in Mississippi because my grandfather had been around it and around the Capitol for so long. And for me, it was just I'm such a family person that it was just one of those moments of, oh, this would be so much fun to be a part of this. I had an interest in, just being a part of it. And so anyway, so that's how I got, just begged, please let me come do anything. So started at the bottom of the barrel, writing the obituaries. And, basically it was the funeral home would send you the form, for the person who had passed away. And, it had all of the information on it. And, it was pretty standard. But my grandfather would say, these are the rules for writing an obituary. You never say that someone passed. You never say that someone expired. You never say that someone was funeralized. You always start with, that this person died. And you write the obituary straightforward, simply, that type of thing. So I always kind of laugh a little bit here and there when I'm reading obituaries along the way, the different creative ways. My grandfather said, you don't necessarily have to be creative with someone when they've passed away.
Do you lend a critical eye to obituaries now?
I try not to. I really try not to.
Oh my. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm fascinated by the fact that you had this huge desire to work in the family business. Was it a desire to just be working with your family like that, with your grandfather, and or was it like actually working in a newspaper that attracted you, or a combination of both?
Well, I think it started out just, being about working with the family because, like I said, we were just so close. But it quickly became this was my love. This was my
Mm.
passion. I mean, he would take me with him. Like I said, I was a 16-year-old girl. He would take me with him to do interviews, with the local mayor or, whatever the fight in the town was at the time. We would go and do these interviews. And it was just like, this is just so, so much fun. I just enjoyed seeing how that, going in, covering a board meeting, going in, talking to, people in the community about what was going on. And, it very quickly grew into a passion and something that I really, really loved and still love.
Hmm. I'm glad. Well, I'm grateful to your grandfather, and I'm so glad that you had that close connection with him to get started on this
Yeah.
path. Can you tell me about it? What you're 16 now, writing obituaries. So what's your path after that?
So I did that during the summers, through high school. And then when I graduated, went on to college and studied journalism. Ended up transferring to a college back in the small town where the newspaper was, just simply because at the time my uncle had gotten sick and I needed to be there to help. And so anyway, it worked out for the best for me to be there. Stayed there, worked through school. And then when I got out of school, came back to the newspaper, was working. And after my grandfather developed dementia. And so after that time, it just became the time for the family to sell the newspaper. It was just not feasible to keep it going. And so, this was really before he developed dementia. He started talking about selling and then encouraged me to look at another small town up the road. Clearly, you can see I like small town journalism. Looked at another small town up the road at a weekly newspaper there that was looking for a news editor. And it turned out just, I'm really big on relationships, and so is my family. And so it was really one of those, a friend of my grandfather's who, in church one Sunday morning said, we're looking for a news editor. So he told me, he said, Collins, the news commercial in Collins, Mississippi is looking for a news editor. And all I knew about Collins, Mississippi was that Gerald McCraney was from Collins, Mississippi, the actor. And that's as far as my knowledge of Collins went, except for that it was a road sign on the highway as I passed through on my way to Jackson. And I remember thinking, I don't want to go to Collins. There's nothing there but the roads. Like, what am I going to do there? And so I went on to Collins, ended up spending 10 years there, had a wonderful time in a small town covering, like I said, city council, board of aldermen meetings, school board meetings, board of supervisors meetings, chamber of commerce events, just local culture, interviewing people. And, it was fantastic. We developed a quarterly magazine while I was there that was really about, life in South Mississippi, and, traveled all over and interviewed artists and, just musicians and just fascinating people in Mississippi. So that was really where I got my start. Beyond, well, I would just continued my career. Um, and absolutely like saw the true value of a hometown newspaper in that small community. It was only 30 miles up the road from where we had been, with our family newspaper, but that 30 miles made a difference. It was a rural community. And so on Wednesday afternoons, when that newspaper would come back from press, the line, and I'm talking about early, like this is like the early 2000s, the line was out the door for people to come pick up the weekly newspaper to see what was going on in the county. And I can remember calling my grandfather and saying, "This is like nothing I've ever seen before. This is like Mayberry." But it was great. It was a wonderful place to get a start in journalism.
Wow. That shows you're doing something right. If you have that much demand. What was it?
It
What
well,
was it?
the newspaper itself was 130 years old. The family that
Yeah.
owns the newspaper, the publisher who is now in her, later in life years, her father started the newspaper. And interesting story, talk about storytelling. So Mr. Arrington, who founded the newspaper in Collins, and my grandfather was at the time the state reporter for the State Times in Jackson. And on Christmas Day, he would always call my grandfather to call in his column. This was when my grandfather was in his like 30s, and he would call in his column for the week to my grandfather, and he would take it, all that. And on that Christmas Day, I don't know what year that was, he called in his column to my grandfather, who happened to be working, because in newspaper you're constantly working, and hung up, and later had a massive heart attack and died. And it was just one of those, like when you talk about just our two families were just so intertwined through church and through those connections. And anyway, it kind of came full circle that I ended up being there working, and they had developed that relationship so long ago.
Yeah. But I'm fascinated though, what was this team that you were a part of, that you were an important part of? What were they doing that was so right? Because you don't see that, at least I haven't seen that, as that kind of desire, people around the block
Yeah,
or a local
yeah.
newspaper. What were they doing? What were you doing?
I think we were covering the local news. I
Hmm.
think we were covering the things that interested people. I mean, it was not, when you get into some of these larger newspapers, especially today, it's pretty much a standard, front page that you're going to see in all the papers across the state that are owned by the same company. And for us, it was covering the local news. I mean, people could come in, they could see what was going on with their elected officials in their communities, but then they could also see like what baby had been born. We would run birth announcements, or who was celebrating a wedding anniversary, or it was just local community news. And I think it was the kind of thing that people really looked for. And I think still today, I guess I have found in my work at Empower that is true. I mean, people are looking for a connection, and I think they found that in their local community newspaper.
100% agree that people need that. People are looking for it. We're not sure where to find it.
Mm.
But now
Right.
that leads me to where you are now. So tell me about that journey from editor of a newspaper in Collins, and to where you are
Colin.
now at Empower.
Well, I really wasn't even looking to go anywhere. It sort of fell into my lap. A good friend of mine who is a local legislator was in our area, and we had gotten to be pretty good friends. And when the opening came up at Empower, he sent me an email and said, "You really ought to look at this. This would be a good fit for you." And he also knew that my parents were in this area, and so getting back to the Jackson area was something that because I was traveling back and forth on the weekends. So anyway, I did. And, again, I mean, like I said, I followed politics, but was not very, into it, or anything like that. But I did reached out and ended up here in the communications department and did that for several years and then ended up moving into outreach. It was just sort of a natural, I think, because of my newspaper background and because of my getting out and finding people and talking to people who were impacted by whatever was going on in the news or anything like that. It was just sort of a natural move for me to move into this role where I have been able to develop those relationships and bring people in who may not necessarily have been in, otherwise.
Hmm, that's beautiful. But that explains the transition you made there once you joined Empower. But tell me more, though, about you were happy with where you were at and you wanted to be closer to your parents, but was there anything about the actual job with Empower that you saw from the outside that attracted you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think, and honestly, I was a proponent of school choice before I ever even knew what school choice was. It
Hmm.
was one of the, I mean, I can remember having conversations about, I'm not married, I don't have children, but I remember having conversations about, if I had kids, like I would do everything I could to send them wherever I felt was, best for them. I mean, I could remember saying that, and it's funny, I have thought many times since then, wow, I was an advocate, didn't even know it. But yeah, when I started realizing, doing my research about Empower and realizing what they were about and their stance on the issues that we, work on, it was definitely an energizing thing for me to think, okay, wow, that would be really cool. That would be a fun thing to be a part of.
Hmm.
And I also believe, like, the Lord just directed my path, bringing me to this point. Because as I look back on it and the fun things and it really is fun. The work that we've done, it's so exciting. And I never could have imagined that I would be able to be a part of something like that.
Hmm. I'm glad. Is there anything that sticks out, a particular story where you've seen an impact or really a shining moment that you can share for us one since you've joined till now?
Um, yeah, yes. Well, there's so many.
Hmm.
The most recent one was last week. Let's see, yeah, one day last week, I had the opportunity to take a videographer with me, and we went out and re-interviewed a family that held an ESA, a special needs ESA for their daughter. I interviewed her. It's interesting because I interviewed her 5 years ago when I started at Empower, and they were waiting to get an ESA and they were on the wait list. And we did a whole campaign I didn't even know what an ESA was. And I got to Empower, and actually my legislator friend, I called and I was like, can you explain all this to me? So we sat and talked through all this. But anyway, so I interviewed her when we had this, wait list of 200 and something kids that were in this lottery system, waiting to see if they would get an ESA so that they could use it to go to a school. And I interviewed her family, and this little girl was so sweet, so quiet, so shy, would barely look you in the eye, just, had repeated first grade 3 times, just, had no self-confidence. Her parents were just desperate to get her into a setting that would help her. So anyway, I told that story. She was able to get the ESA that year as we did our waitlisted campaign, and they cleared the waitlist that year. So she went on to go to the school that best met her needs. And I ran into her at Tractor Supply. I don't really necessarily shop at Tractor Supply, but I happened to be there picking up dog food one day several months ago. Ran into her with her mother, and we stopped and talked, and and her mom was just telling me how great she was doing and all this. And I had followed them on social media and saw, she barrel races. And so we have horses, and I was thinking, oh, how cool, we should tell this story, that she's barrel racing and doing all these things now. So we went out last week and met her at the barn with her horse and her parents, and sat down and told the story of this little girl who is barrel racing. I mean, you want to talk about all the confidence in the world. I mean, she's just, I came away from that just with this just full heart of just, oh my gosh, this child, like her whole life is totally different because of her confidence and her, I mean, at the end, I said something about, what's in your future? And she started naming off all these things she wanted to do. And I was just like, just so amazed. And so it felt so fulfilling to see a child who I saw 5 years ago to the point of last week just blossom. It made it worthwhile for me for sure.
That's beautiful. And I heard a quote recently about how students or kids will follow anyone of their peers that has confidence because it's such a scarce commodity now. And it seems like it's quite the contribution to your community to be able to empower young leaders with confidence like that because they are going to go on to be leaders. That's beautiful. And it really does speak to the importance of the school choice that you're doing. That's gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about some failures? What about a challenge? Maybe not a failure, but a challenge that you've had in your journey, and how did you overcome it?
I would say that I think the biggest challenge for me is I'm not a policy minded person. Like that's not we just recently went through the what is it, the Working Genius program or class with our team. And my working geniuses were invention and enablement, I believe was the second one. And I remember thinking that is so true because I'll get halfway down a project and then think, okay, should I have done this? Is this something, is this, I just know I'm a creative mind and that's the way my mind works. I never think about all the things that, all the strategies behind all these things. This is where I go. And so for me, the policy side of things has been something that I have really, it's been a challenge. It's been something, but thankfully with our team, we've got such great policy people on our team and they're so good at, I'll say, okay, now explain to me, what does this mean? What is this? You talk to me because I don't understand all these. And so that's been really helpful. But I would say that it was a challenge, but it's something that, you just persevere and just, keep digging into, even if it's uncomfortable. And even if you feel like the dumbest one in the room, which sometimes I do. But, you just have to ask the questions, I guess. And that's been something that, we have a really great environment, like I said, where, those dumb questions are answered and it's very much appreciated. So
I have to imagine though that fresh set of eyes and allows you to communicate more effectively to the wider public that isn't an expert. Have you found that to be the case?
I think so. I really do. I think yes, because I think the general public or other people in the public are not the policy. They don't dive into it like some of our geniuses that we have here do. And so I think that it does give a perspective of, okay, the average Mississippian who this is not something they think about every day. Like, how do we relay that to somebody like that in a way that they're going to go, you know what, that's true. Like, yeah, I do believe in, or I do agree with that. Or, yeah, that's something I've never thought about, but yeah, yes. I think a good conversation that I get to have, I have a sister who is in the education department at one of the local universities, colleges. And anyway, she teaches student teachers. And so it's really great because she and I can sit around and have great conversation and I'll talk about these things. And her comment to me is always, okay, Joanna, but why should teachers care about that? Like, like we've got to talk about, how do you meet teachers? How do you engage them and talk with them in a way that gets them interested and, doesn't alienate them. And so I think, I think that was one of the things that Jane really liked was some of our back to school projects that we have done in the past with teacher appreciation type projects. And I think it's really, for me, about, yes, bringing people into the conversation who wouldn't normally be in it, and also bringing them in because in some instances, especially with teachers, they've heard about Empower, and maybe what they've heard about Empower is not good. And
Hmm.
so for us, for me, it's about like extending that, um, or just reaching out and letting them see us in a light that's different than maybe what they've heard. And so that's really where I feel like I have been able to, you know, help Empower shine.
How do you do that? That sounds difficult. You're someone that's already a little bit hostile. It's not a neutral party. It's someone who's like, okay, I've
Right.
heard about you and I don't like you very much. What do you do to get over that barrier that already exists?
I think for me, and again, I sort of have an ally here because I have a teacher friend, a teacher's sister who's teaching and hearing, some of these comments. And so one of the things that I sat down with her and said exactly that, like, how do we reach them? And her comment to me was the bar is very low. I mean, they just want to be appreciated. They just want, to be recognized, not in an official way, but just, the recognition that, hey, what you're doing is important work and it's hard work. And so for me, it's been just simple things. Like we've put together, we did end of the year teacher appreciation gifts last year. And what we did, it was so, I mean, kind of cheesy, but it worked. I mean, it was we put together little Empower branded beach balls with Empower sunglasses and a little I think it was like a Chick-fil-A gift card. And we put them in there and said, you've had a hard year. It's time to kick back and relax, and go enjoy, enjoy your summer. We appreciate all you've done for your students. We did those kind of things. I've also, and our team has been really, really great about participating in some of this, because in other instances, I've asked them to help me write handwritten thank you notes to teachers. Just thank you for all you do. You're making a difference in your classroom, and we do appreciate you. And I think it's just, again, going back to that newspaper, the newspaper days. It's just, people long for connection, and I think it's just the connection. It's easy to, empowers, they don't like teachers. Well, if we haven't done anything to show otherwise or reach out, then that's going to be what they hear and what they think. So we're trying to. I don't want to say that it's because of that, because we do appreciate our teachers, but I think that it helps with that. Sort of defeat that narrative.
That's beautiful. It shows you give your you kind of sold yourself short a little bit about earlier how you say you think about the story and you're going to get creative, but this strikes me that line of thought, this kind of line of reasoning strikes me as very strategic. I see I get the outreach now in your title because you are building these bridges, and that takes a lot of strategic thought. Way to go.
Well, thank you. It's kind of, when you were talking about sort of my challenges, it's kind of like, okay, this is not my area of expertise, but I know I'm creative and I know I can do these kinds of things. And so it's sort of was my way of offsetting some of the, my shortfalls.
Hmm, I gotcha. Tell me, I want to think back a little bit to your grandfather, and I'm struck by how he was so instrumental in starting you off on this. I'm curious about, what was it about him that made you want to follow him into the family business? And are there other inspirations that you've had or have now?
Um, well, I'll show you first of all, this I don't know if you can see this, but this old typewriter up here is his old typewriter from the 1950s when he was covering news in Mississippi, and it just
Hmm.
is my reminder there. And I'm not trying to do all this show and tell, but this handwritten hanging on my wall is his Bobby's Blab from 1930 something, when he was 8 years old and used to handwrite neighborhood newspapers to hand out to the
Oh,
kids in the neighborhood.
that's
So
beautiful.
yeah, so it's just, I feel like it's in the blood. I feel like he loved Mississippi. I mean, he just he gave so much to our state in his role. And I feel like for me, it really is a continuation of that.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Tell me more about him. He sounds fascinating. I hope you don't mind. It's personal, but tell me about him.
No,
What
it's
what
fine.
was it about
I,
Mississippi? And tell me, what was he like?
um, Well, so he was the most sincere. He was, let's see, you're gonna make me cry. He was the most sincere, the most genuine Southern gentleman that you could ever, ever meet. He was, what's the word I'm looking for? He was a mentor. He mentored so many people in Mississippi in their careers. I mean, when he passed away, we had so many, I can't even tell you how many people we had. And he would laugh when I said passed away because he would say, Joanna, I died. When he died, we had we had so many people that came to us and said, I got my start in my career because of his direction and his leadership. And he took that time with people to listen and to mentor and give advice. And he was so willing to give that. And I think it was a lot to do with just, again, wanting to better our state, because I think he knew that, that these people, could do great things and with a little direction could end up, leading Mississippi. He did a lot of that. I mean, he wrote books about local business leaders and political leaders and church leaders in our church. I could go on and on all day. You'd have to cut me off, but he was a great man, and he mentored me. He helped direct my life, and I'm so thankful for that.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I want to research him more, read some of his books. I'll have to.
Yes.
Can you share some links to the titles with me, and I'll put it in the
Absolutely.
description? Okay. I'll
Yeah,
put it in the
I will.
description. Thank you. Okay. So we're talking about seeing the future of your state, the seeing like what the potential is. And can you tell me, what do you see now as some of the biggest challenges for Mississippi?
We've been doing some of these town halls around our state here in the last several months, and we did some a couple of, or last year even. And I think for me, I think everybody has a perspective of the life from the life that they've lived. And I think for me, my perspective of Mississippi was all of these wonderful things and the advancements that we have had, and the great strides that we've made. And recently we changed our state flag, and that was a great celebration in our state. But then you go into some of these rural areas of Mississippi, and you hear from people who have not had the same background and not had the same experiences and opportunities that I had growing up. And I came away from that. Was really hard for me, because I came away thinking our state, or I went into it thinking our state is doing really, really well. And I came away thinking, there are people who are really struggling, and there are people who don't feel that way and don't feel like we've made strides. And all the heart and soul that we've poured into the work in Mississippi, we've done really well, but we have a long way to go.
Mhm. What are your hopes? What are your goals? How can we target these challenges, or how is Empower targeting these challenges in Mississippi?
Well, my biggest hope is that we can get the universal ESA passed this year, because I think that would be wonderful for the kids of Mississippi. I think that it would be, I can't even imagine what kind of a celebration we would have in our office if we were able to, have that happen this year. I think that is my number one hope for our future, just because of seeing, again, like pointing back to Kinsley is her name, the horseback rider that we did the story on. Looking at her life and how her life has changed because of that, I think all kids should have that opportunity. And I think that if we were able to provide that in Mississippi, that would be amazing.
I love it. You said you had a videographer there with you to see Kensley doing the barrel racing and
Yes.
all that type of stuff. Are you going to drop a video for us at some point?
Well, I absolutely will. We just finished filming last week, and so it will probably be the I don't know when this is going to air, but it'll probably be the first of the year before we have that ready to go and release that. But yes, absolutely, we will. I'm this is what I'm very excited about it.
Tell me more. What's the what is it that gets you excited about it? Tell me more. I want to give us a
Um,
sneak peek.
Well, I think it's just seeing her, like she's just blossomed and
Mhm.
hearing her parents talk about, the struggle. Her mom works for the gas company and her dad is a mechanic. And so, the possibility of private school was very slim for them, without an ESA. And so hearing them talk about, how it's changed her life and seeing how excited they are and how they found hope with her and and just hearing her talk about wanting to, what did she tell me the other day? She wanted to get into photography, and she wanted to continue to pursue barrel racing, which she taught herself via YouTube how to barrel race. She had a horse, but she taught herself how to, I mean, she trained this horse and has learned how to barrel race with this horse. Which again just points to the fact that she's realizing, hey, I am able to do, I am capable. Hearing her mom, I had forgotten that when her mom reminded me that she had been through first grade 3 times, then I thought, wow, what does that do for a kid? I mean, no wonder she wouldn't look you in the eye. She had no belief in herself, and so just seeing that and seeing her with her horse and seeing her, I mean, she came up to me like we were best friends. I was so
Mhm.
thrilled because I didn't know that she would even remember me 5 years later. And she
Hmm.
hugged me, was showing me all, and she texts me videos all the time of her barrel racing and her, all these things. And so to be able to release her story, we also want to do it in conjunction with the Dixie National Rodeo, which is coming to Jackson in February. And we have a whole campaign around it that we're going to use. Um, but anyway, it's very exciting.
I love it. Okay, well, I'm excited
Mhm.
too. Thank you for sharing that sneak peek, and please share the link
Yeah,
when you get it, and I'll share it.
absolutely.
I'll add it, even if this is posted already, I'll add it to the description so that people, maybe they come back to this podcast, will find it. So that'd be great.
Definitely.
All right. Well, just one last question. Can you nominate anyone for us to interview next here on Neighbors in the Network?
Yeah, I'll tell you where who sort of helped me when I was getting started with outreach. I didn't even really mention about our ambassador program, but we have an ambassador program that we are really starting to build and grow, and it's really become a great thing. And so when I was getting started with that was Taylor Dawson at Beacon. I don't know if you've interviewed her yet, but Taylor was just, I mean, the things that she's done at Beacon in outreach are pretty amazing. And she is so gracious to, share that with me, and has been helpful along the way. If I've had questions or, hey, how are y'all doing this? She's been really helpful with me there. And I have appreciated that so much.
Wonderful. I will add that name to our nominee list, and we'll be reaching out to Taylor sooner rather than later. Joanna, it's been so wonderful getting to chat with you. I uh, I really do feel inspired. I feel after our conversation lighter. And so I'm grateful, and I hope our listeners feel the same. So thank you, Joanna.
Well, thank you very much. I sure appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking time with me today.
It was my pleasure. All right, let's talk soon, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to Neighbors in the Network, an offering from the State Policy Network. We hope that this podcast can serve as a place for empathy, understanding, and human connection. Please let us know about your thoughts in the comments section. And thanks again.